want to fend for myself, and I want to build people up for them to fend. Hey everybody, Clark Fredericks here with a new episode of the Free Like Me podcast. Guests come in here, they speak their truth, they leave their pain and shame behind, and they walk out of here free like me. If you want to be a guest on the show, reach out to me on any social media site, send me a private message, go to my website, freelike-me.com, fill out a form, we'll set up a consultation call, and you could be sitting across from me sharing your story and freeing yourself. If you're interested in my coaching program, same thing, fill out a form or send me a private message. And my book, Scarred, is due out July 29th. It is almost here. We're 2 weeks away. Very exciting. Been working on this for a decade plus, and it's finally coming to fruition. You can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, anywhere books are sold, and pre-order your book now. My guest this week is Mark Crawford. He is the director of New Jersey chapter. Sometimes I get stuck on words, people. Just give me a break. Director of the New Jersey chapter of SNAP, which is for Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. And he was abused by a Catholic priest, and he's here to share his story and to give you the courage to share your story and free yourself. Let's meet Mark. Mark, welcome to the show, brother.
Clark, thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. We met when we were both working as advocates for the new statute of limitations law here in New Jersey, which we did get passed finally. And it was a pleasure to meet you then. I'm honored to have you in the studio now.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mentioned in the opening, that you've spoken in at Washington, D.C. and across the country. Just share a little about what you were doing in those speeches.
Well, I was invited to the White House by the vice president at the time, it was Joe Biden, and it was a 2-day roundtable session on sexual violence and assault in America, but particularly for the first time, the focus was male sexual victimization. I'd been complaining that nationally we have plenty of services for women who are abused, but when men come forward to talk about their abuse, even at the local rape crisis centers, the first thought or response is, oh, you're the offender. They couldn't comprehend that men or boys could be the victim of abuse. So that had to change. And of course, we needed services. And that was the whole effort to drive, was to help bring greater awareness throughout the country to all the national rape crisis centers to say, look, we need to develop and provide services and programs for boys and men who are sexually abused.
And did anything come into that?
Absolutely.
They did.
In fact, after my 2-day roundtable session, I'm very proud of the fact that they actually federally changed the definition of rape, which did not include boys or men as, the possibility of being raped or anal rape. So that was changed. That law was changed only in 2009.
Wow.
It's incredible, but again, things began to then change in terms of services provided for boys and men.
I've had 2 guests in here on the podcast, Seth Gell and just recently Jody Plauché, and they both had rape kit tests on them, which were positive for their attackers' DNA.
Right.
So maybe your law helped.
Especially in the case of a child being victimized, it's long after there's no physical, or I want to be careful. There's certainly evidence, emotional, mental evidence of abuse, but things such as DNA are often, not available. So it's important that we come to understand that, even though you can't see it, there's always scars, lifetime scars left from someone who's been sexually abused.
Correct. Is SNAP, the SNAP organization, in every state?
It is. It's not just in every state in the country. We are now international. We have chapters in Australia, Canada, Europe, all over Europe, Ireland.
Tell myself and the audience what the SNAP network does.
So, SNAP Network is a support group for survivors. So, what we try and do in most states, we have regular meetings of those who want to come and join a meeting. They could be a victim or a family member or supporter of victims.
Let me just stop you 1 second.
Sure.
Is it just for
No.
for priest abuse? It's for
No.
any abuse.
It's for any abuse.
Okay.
The vast majority are those generally abused by clergy, but it could be any clergy, not just Catholic priests. They're certainly not the only ones who offend.
Any abuse though? Like whether it's a family member or more clergy abuse.
Yeah, no, any abuse, sexual abuse. And again, we're not therapists, but we are a support group where really most victims, I think, find very beneficial when they're in a group setting and can freely talk about their history of abuse and feel safe. And of course, we set up parameters. It's never repeated outside the meeting. You can say as much or as little as you want. We do try and screen to some extent prior to somebody coming in and participating in one of our group sessions. And a number of states have now online group sessions. So if you're very far from a meeting place, you can possibly join one of our online sessions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the most helpful things for my healing process was when I was locked up in prison, getting into group therapy. And it was for childhood trauma. It wasn't necessarily just abuse, but it was just like I heard some of the most horrific stories of trauma that didn't involve sexual abuse. And we could, just as you said, we could talk freely. Everything we said in that setting had to be kept private. If you ever talked about anything outside of the meeting, you were instantly kicked out. And just being with a group of people that had childhood trauma and were sharing it was like the biggest healer for me.
Well, you know, we often live for years in silence and wonder, am I the only one? Why did this just happen to me? And when you start to hear others tell such a similar story in many ways, you know, the impact or effect may be a bit different, but the grooming process and how we felt it was our fault, or the shame and the guilt that a survivor often places on him or herself, okay, without realizing, wait a minute, you know, this doesn't belong to me. It belongs to that person who perpetrated. And when you introduce somebody like a family figure or a member of the clergy, there's very little difference. It's like the equivalent of incest, because there's such a bond of trust that's so important, that's developed first. These predators are very skilled at getting someone comfortable or in a setting where they think this is normal behavior. And then they introduce the sexual abuse part. And the victim is so conflicted, so confused, especially as a young child or young adult. It's very, very difficult to sort out. And it causes all kinds of confusion. Many victims, not all, often have forms of addictions of all kinds. What happens is we develop negative coping mechanisms, and we don't realize it. And I've had victims, survivors come to me for the first time in their 80s saying, I've never told anyone, never, but I've dealt with this my whole life. It is never, never too late to seek help, to understand, and to move forward from the abuse. But it takes work and healing and the ability to be able to express what was done to you.
And I mean, you and I are, you know, we're probably a couple years different in age, but the same, you know, the same era, you know, the 70s,
Sure.
you know, and just to talk bad about a priest back then, or a Boy Scout leader, or a cop, or a teacher, or a coach, or a doctor, like you just didn't do that back in the day. Everybody was respected. Kids were meant to be seen, not heard. And like, to come, and there was no online support, no Snap network,
Right.
no, there was nobody to go to except the cops, and it just led to people keeping this in and living, with shame and pain.
I've dealt with so many other survivors, and it's really incredible how I've learned that there are many reasons why one remains silent for so long. Of course, what I mentioned a few minutes ago, first, the shame, the guilt. No one will believe me. This is a well respected member of the community. How can I come forward? Then there's those who still live in the situation. The offender might be nearby, might be a family member, might be a coach who's still working with another member in the family. So victims are very reluctant to come forward. They feel they cannot. They won't be believed, or it will somehow impact their life in ways they really do not see or can understand. And I want to say this is really important. I feared that for years. And when I finally was able to speak out, I felt I had no choice or change would not happen, right? So I began to tell my story publicly. And to this day, it's never comfortable, but I know it's so important and that things will not change unless we tell our story. And all the negative impact I expected to get back from others, yeah, there's been a few people who will never understand. I think it's important for every survivor to understand your own healing can never, never depend on what somebody else thinks. Not your parents, not your family, not relatives, not neighbors, friends, coaches, or people in your local church. You have to be, and it takes some strength, right? But you need to stand up and understand it doesn't matter what they think. What matters is how you're dealing with the abuse that impacted you, that you didn't ask for, you didn't deserve. And I've watched many, many, many survivors over time really progress and heal. So it's very possible. Never think it's too late.
And each person that speaks out just gives strength to the next person to finally
Without
speak
a doubt.
out.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And I mean, the key thing to realize for any person abused is that you're talking about an adult taking advantage of a child. That you can don't think, you were complicit in it. Your little 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old brain cannot grasp what a predator is doing.
Oh, that's such a good point, Clark. And I will tell you, I will share a bit of my own experience. Look, as a young teenager, when sex is introduced or somebody's touching you, I don't care whether it's a man, woman, babysitter, whoever it is, your body's going to physically respond. And for a young teenager, you may be overwhelmed with fear, but the warmth, the sex, the touching, the caressing, or the physical reaction of one's, and a boy is penis, right? You're having an erection. It's so hard to think, well, then why did that happen? Or why did that feel good? And therefore, I must have wanted it, or it's somehow my fault. And it's just not the case. It's just not the case.
Why don't we use that as a segue right there into your story? And,
Sure.
And just take me back where you grew up and what church we're talking,
Sure.
what the priest's name was,
Yeah.
and go into what happened.
I grew up in Bayonne, downtown Bayonne, St. Andrew's Parish. And I grew up in a large Catholic Irish family. I had 6 brothers and 2 sisters, so there were 9 of us. My parents were very active in the church. We were devout, practicing Catholics for the most part. Like I said, my dad worked bingo. My mom did things around the church, the linens, the flowers. She was always helping, right? So a priest, his first assignment, his name is Father Kenneth Martin, was assigned to my parish in St. Andrews. And, I guess one day in talking to him, he realized that we had a train set up in our basement. And he was a big train buff. He had once worked for the railroad. So, and long and short of it, he wound up coming over for dinner. He ingratiated himself into our family life, and he spent a great deal of time in my house, um, a lot of time. Beepers had just come out. He could use the beeper, didn't necessarily have to be a directory to be on call. And over time, he took a liking to me. I had aspired, even before he came along. I wanted to be a priest. I really, that whole lifestyle really attracted me for some reason. I went to church daily. It was a place where I found a lot of peace, and it was very, very important to me. So he sort of convinced my family he was going to be my mentor. And he took me on trips all over, especially down the Jersey Shore, but all over the country, actually. He took me on a trip to Europe. And he asked permission to take me on a trip during the summer for a few weeks to Colorado. We were staying in a very remote home up in the mountains. It was a friend of his. And that's on the train. We took a train, of course, overnight from Chicago to Denver. And it was then that he introduced the sexual abuse. I woke up.
Were you in like a cabin on the train?
Yeah.
Oh,
We
you
were
had
in a
your own
sleeper
private
car.
cabin?
We had bunk beds or whatever in a sleeper car. And I woke up and his hands were down my pajamas and he was massaging my penis. I had an erection. I woke up with that. And he tried to explain, this is normal. This is okay when people love each other. Don't worry. He just tried to explain it away. But from that point on, every several times a week, he managed to, get in a position where he had
could touch
access, and touch me, and yes,
Would
absolutely.
it be at your home? Would it be at the rectory?
It did happen at my home. He would stay till late hours of the night, or 1 or 2 in the morning at times. He'd come over, have dinner, say he was tired. He'd ask for me or one of my younger brothers to rub his shoulders or his back. Eventually, he said he was tired and he'd want to go in one of the bedrooms, right? So we went in there, and he would. My dad was always working, big, large family. He was always working to try and make ends meet for us. And, the priest would tell my mom, and make no mistake, he had to win over my parents, my mother. He had to. They trusted him implicitly. He would say mass in our house. He would pray at our house with my mom, say the divine office that priests often do. And I mean regularly. So she really trusted him. I had no idea that anything like this would go on.
Now, is he shutting the door when he goes into the bedroom?
Oh, yes.
The door is shut, and your
yes.
mother never thought twice about it?
I guess not, no. Like I said, he took me on trips, and the abuse went on for a number of years. When I went off to college at 17, he became very depressed, almost despondent that I was leaving. And he was calling, writing letters constantly. And because he was a priest, he could come and visit me even when we weren't supposed to have visitors. But I was in a college seminary program, so he had access that others would not have. And he would take me out. And by that time, I had really begun to withdraw or try and avoid him. Even well before that, even in the high school years, when he was over my house, he expected me to be home. And if not, he was very upset about it. We were on a family vacation. I was thrilled. I thought I would get away from him for a few weeks. My mom's side of the family was from Ohio. We traveled out there every summer to spend time with our cousins out on Lake Erie. And then I learned he wanted to come. He rented a big van, and he offered to drive, and he joined us out there. I wasn't there but a few hours. I ran off to spend time with my cousins, my age, fishing. We were running, going on the jet ski. And I came back in the evening. He was irate. He dragged me into a van, drove off. Now, all the adults were in another house down below on the lake, so they didn't see any of this. But yeah, he dragged me into the van, drove off for hours. He drove around, furious. I was really scared. He was going to end it. He drove onto a set of railroad tracks and stopped in town.
And what was he furious about? That you had
That-
been out playing all day?
Right, that I wasn't there with him.
And predators, like, I think to keep themselves sane,
Right.
they think it's like a mutual relationship.
Exactly.
That's what keeps them like from smoking a bullet.
Right, yeah. They actually justify in their mind that this is simply, I love this person loves me, and this is perfectly fine. He often said things like that, and he always asked me the mental torment, because, one, I was so afraid. There were times when I spoke my mind, he clocked me. He hit me so hard. So I was really afraid to speak the truth. He would often ask me, how do you see me in your life? When I always called him father at first, he wanted that to stop. No, you call me Ken. It just went on. And he, as he realized I was avoiding time with him as much as I could, he became more and more controlling, more angry, and I became more fearful every day. Every day. He took me on a trip to Europe. I begged not to go. He slugged me pretty good for not wanting to sleep in the same bedroom with him. I put my bags in another room, and he got very upset. It was a really rough 4 years for me. I really thought about, what way do I have out of this? Thank God I never took that route or went down that road, but I have to say there were dark times, and that crossed my mind.
Right. As you became 17, 18, 19, I mean, did you see him like starting to like interact with younger boys in the parish?
Well, at that time, remember, by that time I was living away at college, so I didn't see all that. But yes, before that, most certainly he interacted with other younger boys. He was most comfortable with younger boys, and that was clear. He was very authoritative, very strict, but let's say very orthodox. But I just couldn't understand how other adults couldn't see the
Well, that was going to
time.
be my next question. No other parishioners, like the hair on the back of the neck, ever like raised up?
Well, one or two of the women, after I had left for college, and when I did, they told me he went into seclusion for weeks. He lost 30 pounds. He was sick. They didn't know what was wrong. And when they tried asking him, I don't know if he just said my name or something, but when I had come home for a weekend visit, I remember they had approached me and said, hey, what happened between you and Father Martin? And of course, I wasn't about to say what had been going on. I became very upset, almost to the point of tears, and just left. Just kept walking on. I'm like, I can't talk about this. I can't talk. So that's and even then, I ran through my head. Are they going to ask me? Did something happen? Did not to you? Did some? None of that. No one. I felt really alone, and I will tell you, I made several attempts to tell others. Finally, it was prior to my dad becoming ill and me leaving the seminary, but he had a very good friend, priest, who happened to be stationed where I was in college. And I actually taught CCD at this friend's parish. There's another priest. I would see him every Sunday after Mass. He would always talk to me. So I said to him, hey, Father Bill, can we go? I want to talk to you about something, one Sunday. Can we go out? Yeah, sure. So we went for a ride. And I told him that Father Martin, for the last several years, had been sexually abusing me. He turned white as a ghost. He said, we'll figure this out. We'll pray about it. We'll figure it out. And that's sort of how he left it. He never again crossed my path. Even when I saw him on Sundays, he avoided me like the plague. He didn't come to me, never spoke to me again. 2 or 3 years later, that same priest also was abusing 2 younger brothers from the local high school.
Oh, jeez.
So I was like, oh, no wonder why. Then I could understand the reaction and why he never came back to me. There was yet another priest I had told. And although I never knew he did anything, but after my dad died and my mother and I talked about our abuse years later, I found out that he tried to warn her and said, listen, you can't let Father Martin anymore in your house near David or Mark. You know, you just can't do that. You know, I can't tell you more than that. Just for everybody's good, just do that. So my mother never said anything to me, but she switched parishes. She stopped going to St. Andrews, went to another parish, and that's sort of when the relationship with Father Martin ended with my family.
And you had told me, you know, even when you were in seminary school,
Yes.
like one of the older boys in this school, like,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
approached you to touch you.
So, I wasn't there very long at all. And a Salesian brother, he was a professed brother, a year or two ahead of me. And so he was in some of my classes, actually. We were classmates, some classes. But he was definitely older and a professed brother. So he wore a collar, like a priest. And he befriended me right away. We were both into sports. He was very... he had a gregarious personality. He's very, certainly not a quiet person, right? Well liked, and he was trying to convince me, hey, the Salesian order is where you might want to be. You know, we work with kids, all these things. I was actually studying with the Franciscan Capuchin group. So one day he actually did make a move, and just started groping me and handling my privates. And I didn't know what to do. I froze. And again, just all kinds of things, flashbacks started running through my mind. Is what happens with priests or clergy? Is this normal? Is this everybody? I became very, very confused. Ran off, avoided him like the plague. I didn't want anything to do with him. And actually, later on, reported him to my superior, who went ahead and spoke to the superiors of that order. And the long and short of it, it took a little while, but not less than a year later, they removed him and said, okay, he can't, he's no threat to you anymore. What they didn't tell me is they put him in a parish in Manhattan for this summer. And then another priest from the same order said, hey, we could use you down in Tampa at an all-boys school. You know, you can work with the kids. You know, he spoke English and Spanish, and they said, listen, this will really help us. So they transferred him down there and put him in charge of the boys' dormitory. So at night he slept with all the boys. So years later, what do you think? We discovered he was looking at possible criminal charges. He had molested at least 5 or 6 boys. There was even more. He couldn't even keep track of them all, you know, while he was stationed there. And eventually he left that religious order. But he was still working with children down in the Tampa area, in a theater, you know, teaching them acting and singing.
I mean, they remove him from where you were. There's got to be a file, you know, like
Right.
a stamp that says, you know, removed for inappropriate touching of a male student.
Right.
And then they put him in charge of a
Right.
dormitory.
Because this was very common. They don't tell the other priests or clergy, gee, this guy has a problem with pedophilia or has abused. They don't tell them.
They don't.
They don't warn anybody. And this is a real problem. This is why so many kids were abused that never should have been victimized. And it's It's because there was no consequence. There was no laws. They had no accountability. In New Jersey, there was complete immunity. You couldn't sue them even if you knew it, even if it was proven. They had immunity. Nonprofits or religious institutions in New Jersey had complete immunity. And that's the first law I worked to change and got that done in 2006, removing it. But most people didn't even know that law existed.
Where you could not sue a clergy, a priest.
Yeah, a nonprofit. If you were a member or beneficiary of that nonprofit, it didn't matter what happened. You had no legal recourse. Originally, that law was meant to protect them from slips. Somebody, going to their property, maybe slipping, tripping, or falling. But now it got used for everything, right? And when somebody came forward and said, hey, my son or daughter was abused, like, sorry, we have immunity. Go away. We'll pay you a little bit of money, but we want silence. We want a confidentiality agreement. They offered that to me constantly. They wanted my silence. Now, after my father died, I went and told a local bishop, all right? He didn't like what I was telling him. He didn't treat me kindly. But they did, to some degree, act. I'm told by the deacon I first spoke to that the bishop showed up at the rectory, started asking questions, and they alerted, at the time, they even told McCarrick, who was the bishop of Metuchen. He wasn't even in charge of Newark. So that's why I know he knew. He knew then Bishop McCarrick. He was the bishop of Metuchen.
McCarrick, who would go on to become cardinal.
Cardinal,
right?
correct.
McCarrick
and who abused kids and
of,
seminarians,
right.
yes. Who was actually defrocked for his abuse. But back at that point, he was the bishop of Metuchen. He was then made the Archbishop of Newark. And one of the first things he did was to promote my abuser to serve as his personal secretary. So he was promoted. He was promoted.
That's an honor.
Sure is.
Yeah.
And nothing gets to the archbishop or bishop without going through the secretary. So at that time, it appears that seminarians that McCarrick years earlier had forced to sleep with him were starting to come forward. So who better to have at his side than somebody who was already compromised, who he already had the goods on, who he knew was an abuser.
Right.
And that for sure, I am telling you, was not an accident that they promoted this man to serve at his side. It was to
so
insulate.
he could cover himself
exactly
because of
Right.
people like you, who's
Right.
he's abused, and he can also cover McCarrick.
Exactly.
Ugh.
Yes.
Man, it seems like they were everywhere.
They were. I don't believe there's a parish, not a single parish in any diocese that has been untouched at some point in time by a clergy member who has sexually abused a minor.
It's
no doubt in my
insanity.
mind.
It's insanity.
The numbers are staggering. And even though many dioceses today have put out a list and have admitted to a number of priests who are abused, every time there is a civil investigation or a grand jury presentment where there's a real investigation, the numbers are significantly higher than what the church admitted. There's many more clergy who had abused. And that continues even to today. Quite concerning, several ongoing situations, even here in the Garden State.
Still,
Where
they say they've cleaned up the problem.
Well, a perfect example, if I may, Seton Hall University, some years ago, after McCarrick, when he was the Archbishop of Newark, he was eventually promoted, became Cardinal of Washington, D.C., the most premier, important role in this country as a member of the Catholic hierarchy. A very powerful and influential man.
Who promotes somebody like that to the cardinal?
Only the Pope.
Only the Pope.
Only the Pope. There were questions about McCarrick. There were concerns raised. He certainly knew The papal nuncio here in the United States, the equivalent of the ambassador, he was warned, he was told. Other cardinals, Cardinal O'Connor of New York, raised some alarm bells and said, listen, there's smoke here. Do not promote this man. And at one point, it appears the Pope was not going to do it. He reversed course and then promoted him. He became Cardinal of Washington, D.C. But even then, another subsequent secretary who served him in Newark was now put in charge of the seminary at Seton Hall University. And he kept an apartment at the seminary for then Cardinal McCarrick. He would frequently stay at the seminaries. He wanted to be around the young men. That definitely was his modus operandi.
So does Seton Hall have a seminary
Yes.
school?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
A college, the minor and major seminary are both located for a number of years since the 80s at Seton Hall University. And of course, there's been a number of allegations of abuse of seminarians. And so,
By McCarrick or by this person in charge
Well,
or by others teaching?
by others and McCarrick, from what I understand, not just McCarrick, right? There were other abuses that seminarians had reported. Several years ago, our current Cardinal Tobin, he also, as Seton Hall is a Catholic university, so as a Catholic university, the local ordinary, bishop or cardinal, oversees that school. He is in charge. He is the president of the Board of Regents of Seton Hall. This is Cardinal Tobin. Now, he issued an investigation by a very renowned law firm, Watkins and Latham, or Latham and Watkins, I'm sorry, to do an in-depth, hey, what happened here with McCarrick at Seton Hall? So a report was commissioned and done, and it was read to the entire Board of Regents, about 30 persons, but never made public, never disclosed. And we didn't really know what came of it. There was one little letter they sent out to the students that said very little, and that was it. So that was 5 years ago that all went down. Well, late last year, early this year, Politico ran a story. Apparently, they've come upon portions of that report. And it stated that 13 members of the clergy, the rector of the seminary, who once was McCarrick's personal secretary as well, he followed my abuser, Ken Martin. He was now in charge of the seminary. Well, when victims came forward to report their abuse, they were ignored. They were kind of fake investigations that never really went anywhere. There was retaliation. And as a college or university, these things are required to be reported under Title IX of federal law, right? And apparently that either wasn't done or the records were manipulated when an audit came up. And these complaints were removed from the file so nobody would know. Now, as you know, over the years since our law changed, right, the statute of limitations, a number of lawyers have or represent a number of these victims. And as such, 5 years ago, the judge had ordered all their files to be turned over as related to any claim of abuse. Well, this report was never turned over until weeks ago in court. The judge, furious, said, how is it that 5 years after my order, I'm just finding out a report from a newspaper, from Politico, from a media outlet, that you never disclosed? This is Seton Hall and the Archdiocese. They tried to say, look, this is attorney-client privilege. Judge didn't buy it. They tried to say, we didn't know we had to report this. No. She said, you're going to turn that over to me immediately, and I'll decide who gets to see what. Now, this is this year. So I ask, what has changed? And if that's not bad enough, and again, the rector of the seminary, Monsignor Joseph Riley, okay, part of that report said, look, he can never hold a position of authority. He can teach, that's it. He cannot hold any positions of authority, within Seton Hall. Well, he wasn't immediately removed. He was allowed to take a 1-year sabbatical. When he came back, Cardinal Tobin promoted him to provost and last year named him and promoted him. He is currently the president of Seton Hall University. For the life of me, I cannot understand this. The man, even by association with McCarrick, number one, it would give me pause to promote him. Not that whether he deserved it or not, he might have deserved it. But the point is, clearly, if we know he hid cases of abuse or retaliated against victims or didn't report it, morally, he failed. Why would we put this man in charge of Seton Hall? 3 weeks ago, a freshman who came on last September, joined the baseball team, was being sexually harassed and hazed in the male locker room, where many of the older students, baseball athletes, would lay on the floor naked and masturbate and challenge him, touch him, make fun of his body. He left, of course, and now they filed a suit against Seton Hall for this hazing and sexual harassment. What have we learned? This is incredible. After everything else that's gone on and the concern about McCarrick, this is going on and you don't know about it? Supposedly the parent had warned or told the coach back in February. It did not stop. Look, different uniforms. One had collars, one had baseball uniform. Same problem.
Right.
When does it end?
So it would appear Cardinal Tobin's compromised as well. If he's promoting people
I'm astounded. He certainly knew or should have known of the report. From what we understand, if the whole board heard it, he should have been in that room and heard the results. I can't imagine he didn't know. He knew the priest took a sabbatical. He comes back. He promoted him to provost and now president. It is stunning. Absolutely stunning. Either the lack of knowledge or understanding is completely negligent or it's intentional. And, it's a matter of covering up whatever else went on at Seton Hall. And so either way, it's quite disturbing.
Yeah.
Very troubling.
And since this report was just given to the judge a few weeks ago, we don't know what's exactly in it.
We don't know yet. No.
And how damning it is.
Correct. We've heard bits and pieces from the Politico stories. They named 13 members of the clergy had knowledge or hid or covered up these abuses.
That's what you mentioned the number 13 before. I didn't know if that was 13 cases of abuse or 13 members. You're saying now members who
knew of
either
or
abused or knew of.
Right, that were implicated. And apparently maybe even a number of bishops who maybe sit on the board. It's not so easy to find out who's on the board of Seton Hall. But formerly at that time, the president of Seton Hall was a layman, not a member of the clergy. He was kind of forced out, and now they wanted a cleric in there, and that's Monsignor Riley. And it's just really unfathomable to me how, knowing the past history and looking at what went on, you would even take the chance of the association and put this man in charge of the university. There's got to be plenty of other qualified priests, clergy, or persons out there who could become president of Seton Hall University.
Right. And I've posted like a lot of things, people are like, oh, Pope Francis did so much. He changed so many rules and laws, but they weren't mandatory. Like they were just on face value. They weren't like the bishops and the cardinals didn't have to make them mandatory.
You can make all the rules you want. If the bishops are not following them, what does it matter?
Right.
And that's clearly been the case. In fact, when it comes to Pope Francis, many, not all, but many of the American bishops, quite conservative, didn't like Francis and refused to follow his lead. Clearly, it's disconcerting. And we now have a new pope, Pope Leo. I hope things change, but I have to raise some alarm. There was just this week, I'm reading about a French bishop who just promoted another priest who had been convicted of rape to a very prominent position within the diocese in France. How is that continuing?
Right.
How? Why? It's just incredible. So alarming. It's most alarming when we hear and see these examples of overlooking someone who's been a serious predator. And, simply by the fact that clergy wearing this collar, they automatically get a level of respect and admiration. And particularly from kids in a family, growing up in a Catholic family, you're taught to respect and honor that. So it's not like any other role, it's very, very, very dangerous to give somebody that automatic kind of trust, confidence, admiration by allowing them to walk in that collar.
I mean, if you turned a blind eye to known abuse, you're just as culpable.
Right. Yes, absolutely. These are well-educated men. This is not somebody who's just came along, has no background, not educated. No, our bishops, our church officials, no. They know the laws. They understand what sexual abuse is. They certainly should understand what sexual abuse of a minor is, and that there are consequences and laws against it. And time again, we hear statements like, well, I didn't really know it was wrong, or they really didn't cross this line or that line, or it was just touching. What don't you understand? What can you not understand?
Right.
There's just no reason for it, and it must change. Time must, long overdue.
Right. Let's real quick, while we still have a few minutes here, touch on the New Jersey law and the Pennsylvania law. New Jersey finally passed their law. PA hasn't yet.
Right.
Our law was held up for the longest time by
20 years
by
more.
Senate President
Yes.
Sweeney.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Discuss that.
Well, and it wasn't just Sweeney. Before him, the Assembly President Albio Series did the same thing. Look, they had connections to other people within the church, whether it be the lawyer for the Camden diocese, seemed to have a lot of influence. Other families, political families that they went to. And, I had lobbied and worked with Senator Joseph Vitale, for years to get this done, as well as you and many other advocates, thankfully. And, he kept saying, we don't have the votes. We don't have the votes. Well, that was not true. Just not true. We had the votes. It would have passed long ago. But he was running interference. We were at the State House. It was supposed to be voted on. He pulled it more than once.
We're talking Sweeney.
Yes. The Senate President. It had passed in the Assembly already at one point, more than once. And then the bill would die. So we would have to start all over again. So that went on for more than 20 years, that fight. Now, ultimately, we have a very, very good law. Is it the best in the country? Not now, because since our law has changed, a few states have said, okay, no statute of limitations ever for any sexual abuse, period. They've totally eliminated the statute of limitations. I pray and hope one day that happens here. But aside from that, we did get a very, very good bill. And it provided a 2-year window, okay? But what most bills don't include, it includes adult victims of abuse. And, believe it or not, you have 7 years from discovery, not 2, used to be 2. Now, you could have known all your life you were sexually abused. But if you didn't understand or know the impact it had upon your life, and let's say you're 70 years old and you start going to a therapist because you've had a drinking problem or a drug problem or whatever it is, and they get to the root of it, which might have been your sexual abuse as a child, right? In many cases it is, right? So from that point, the clock starts ticking. Then you have 7 years. So it's not just till the age of 55, all right? There's no questioning. If you're 55 or younger, you can bring action. Now, it takes an extra step, but if you're older than 55 and you've made discovery beyond that point, you may still have recourse in New Jersey. So that was very, very important.
And the Pennsylvania bill, like they came out with their bombshell Attorney General report of just horrific abuse, and it's sort of like forced New Jersey's hand to like, all right, because our Attorney General said,
Enough.
I'm going to do my own investigation. And then I think Sweeney finally knew, like, all right, the end is going to be near soon. I might as well stop blocking it, and and then it passed.
Yes.
But now, so like Pennsylvania helped our bill to pass, and yet they're still stuck.
That's correct.
What's going on there?
That's correct. Well, like you said, it was clear that a large number of Pennsylvania clergy were taking children to the Jersey Shore where they were victimized. So the crimes were happening here in New Jersey. That's one point. In Pennsylvania, they didn't just have one grand jury report. They had 7. And the last one is enough was enough. You had Jerry Sandusky in Penn State. Then we had McCarrick. And you had the Pennsylvania grand jury reports, which were very damning. And the Democratic House in Pennsylvania has passed that bill more than once, only to die in the Senate, Republican controlled. And I'm not. It's not just about the party, because in many states, some of the Republicans have supported these initiatives and gotten them passed. But here in Pennsylvania, they tried to say, look, we need a constitutional amendment. The scholars say, no, you don't. That's not the case. Certainly if the legislator acts to just change the law, it should be good enough. And if it's not, let it be challenged later. Then allow the challenge. Why now say, oh, we can't do this because it may wind up in court? Nonsense. So there's a number of Pennsylvania lawmakers, Kim Ward and some of the others, who have steadfastly stood in the way of allowing the bill to progress. And it's
because they're in bed with the Catholic Church and
I
parochial
absolutely believe
schools
that.
and
Absolutely.
parishes and
Absolutely believe that. Look, if the bishops of Pennsylvania were openly saying, listen, we let it go. We're not going to oppose this. But they don't. You don't hear them publicly coming out saying, enough is enough. All these years, victims deserve a right. They've tried to settle cases just like New Jersey. They've offered their compensation packages where people wouldn't have to go through the court process. All right? That happened here in New Jersey and in other states as well, New York. So at this point, how can you say out of one side of your mouth, we want the truth, we want healing, we want to be compassionate to victims, and then behind the scenes pay lobbyists and lobby politicians to oppose that very truth from being exposed, from cases getting to court, where victims will have a right to have discovery? That's what they're afraid of. They don't want more of the real truth of who knew what when, what they did and did not do, most often. They don't want that exposed because it will turn off supporters, parishioners, or the faithful. But the faithful deserve to know. And, it is mind-boggling to me that still at this point they don't understand that, look, people will come back and trust if we simply came clean. Right. They still refuse to do it.
Yeah, it's the disheartening part.
Truly.
So, it's not necessarily one political party.
Correct.
It's basically a state-by-state. Because Sweeney was a Democrat.
Yes.
He was the president.
That's right.
I mean, the Democratic Party in a whole in New Jersey were for it.
Yes.
Sweeney was against it.
That's correct.
Now you have the Republican Senate in Pennsylvania where
it's just
certain members
who's connected
are blocking
to who.
it. Right.
Yes.
So it's a state-by-state basis.
Right. It's certainly not a party. I agree with that.
And who's ever affiliated more with the Catholic Church.
That's correct.
And just every hearing, let you say it, because I've said it, but every hearing we had in Trenton, which organization would stand up and oppose the new law?
Oh, the Catholic Conference, without a doubt. That's the lobbying arm of the bishops. They report the bishop is actually head of the Catholic Conference in every state. So they only answer to the bishop. So this is the bishop's bidding. Here in New Jersey, I want to mention this for those who don't know it. Almost 7 years ago, when the New Jersey Attorney General commissioned a statewide investigation of clergy abuse within the church, all right, the Camden bishop at the time, he's not the same bishop today, the former Camden bishop, Bishop Sullivan, said, no, we're not going to cooperate with you, Attorney General. In fact, we're going to oppose this. We don't think it's legal. And they took the Attorney General to court. Unbeknownst to all of us, they asked that all those proceedings, they asked the judges to seal them so the public wouldn't know what was going on. That wish was granted by lower court judges. Outrageous to me. But for 7 years, they managed to keep this under wraps. And the victims were asking the attorney generals, you asked us to come forward, give testimony. We did. Whatever happened? How come we haven't heard anything? What's going on? They couldn't say anything because everything was sealed. Their hands were tied. All right. We then learned late last year, okay, a document the appellate division released, one page, that showed that all 5 Catholic diocese attorneys were aware of the fact that Camden sued, the Bishop of Camden sued the Attorney General to stop any presentment of any kind of investigation from being released. The Attorney General, of course, appealed the lower court's decisions to the Supreme Court. That was heard in late April. It was kind of clear at that point that, hey, they were not buying the church's argument. They were not. Several days later, the brand new Bishop of Camden announced that we are no longer going to oppose. We're reversing, pulling back all our opposition. We'll work with the Attorney General, blah, 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 blah. He was moved by a victim who had written him, not even from his diocese. So this is encouraging. And he didn't ask the victim to come to him. He went to the victim. I found that remarkable because these bishops always say, hey, I'm having a massy healing, come. No. These bishops should be going to these victims. All right? So anyhow.
Where are we at with the report?
So two things. Because the Supreme Court had already heard the case, they had to rule. Well, just 2-3 weeks ago, they did rule in the Attorney General's favor. The grand jury investigation can move forward, will move forward. Of course, things down the road can be looked at and evaluated, but so now a grand jury can be impaneled. Once that's done, and once victims have the opportunity to testify before the grand jury, a report will be finalized and presented. And some or all of that report, we hope all of it, will be released to the public. So it's a ways off, but the report now can go forward. It can happen, and it will happen.
And this has been 7 years in the making.
7 years they stood in the way.
And we're still not near the end point yet.
What I find most troubling is that the other 4 Catholic dioceses, every one of them, knew about it and said nothing. If they thought it was wrong, they should have spoke up publicly. They did not. They were no different. It reminds me of the parable in the Bible of the Good Samaritan. There was a man who was robbed and left naked, beaten, half dead on a roadside. A priest passed by, saw the victim, kept on going. A Levite came by, saw the victim, did the same thing, kept on going. A Samaritan came by, saw the man, picked him up, clothed him, fed him, took him to an inn, said, I'm going to pay you to take care of him till I return a few days from now. You will take care of him. That's what all those the 4 Catholic dioceses should have done. They should have spoken up. If they felt it was wrong, they did not. They allowed the former Camden bishop, Bishop Sullivan, to do their bidding while they remained silent. So to me, they were just as complicit as Bishop Sullivan.
Yeah.
Period.
It's like not many, you hate to keep picking on the Catholic Church, but it's like nobody has a backbone.
Look, I want to be clear about this. It is not the Catholic faith.
I say that over and over.
It is those men who are in a position of authority, who are well-educated men, who have put an institution before the very people they have committed to God to serve. They have disregarded moral behavior, and actually put the welfare of their finances, of their institution, all right, as if they couldn't exist without money. Well, I have no doubt if Jesus Christ walked this earth today, he could care less about any money the church has, or about the structures, or its edifices, or anything else. You are to live and lead by example. And this is what our bishops have lost sight of for centuries. This is not something that just started happening 10 or 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
So it's time for our bishops to step up and practice what they preach.
We'll see if a new pope, you always want to hold out hope. But
you do want to hold out hope.
Yeah.
But I have gone to so many clergy, spoken to so many clergy, and time again, I have been disappointed. And, they sometimes say the right things and do nothing.
Right. As someone who once had dreams of becoming a priest and studied for a few years to become a priest, who was abused by a priest, who's seen the shortcomings of the church, where are you at with faith? Where are you at with, do you go to church? Where are you at with that?
Okay, so I still have a lot of faith. I think faith is important for people who have it. If you get something out of going to church, by all means, I'm okay with that. Go to church. Financially supporting people who are not doing the right thing, I have a problem with that. You don't have to drop the money in that basket, okay? But to have spirituality or to be nurtured, your faith. That said, going to church and being there was always a sacred, safe place for me. It was really important. I loved it. It gave me such strength. I was not abused in the church, although even in confessional, the priest would bring up our sexual occurrences, and outside the confessional too, by the way. And they didn't defrock him for that. They knew, I told them. They didn't act on that, so the seal of confession thing really bothers me. But do I go to church right now? No, because the last time I went to church, it was Easter Sunday, the Vigil Mass, which I loved. I still love it. But I remember at the time, Cardinal Tobin, who was the number 2 cardinal within the Vatican, to the Pope. He told at the time Pope Benedict, who was newly minted as Pope, don't listen to that petty gossip. And I found that I was so angered, so irate by hearing that from a top Vatican official telling the Pope, this is petty gossip? Really? That was it. I could not go back into a church. Now, have I been on a few occasions for a funeral or a wedding? Yes. I have friends, absolutely have friends who are priests, who are good people, few and far between. But it's really hard for me to wait for them to say something so hurtful about a victim, or if a case comes up, even if they talk about it today, it's not very often, I would imagine, from the pulpit. But there was a time when they did, when this all broke out in 2002, 2003. And even then, I was at church. I knew one victim in particular, a female victim, sitting 2 pews behind me, was victimized by a priest in that parish. And a visiting priest was in the pulpit, and he had urged the people to pray for the priest. Didn't say one word about the victim.
Yeah.
And that victim walked out crying. I was so upset that as I walked out of church, I confronted the priest in the vestibule and told him, do you listen to yourself? Do you have any idea of the harm and damage you do? Do you think the priest could do no wrong? What? Why didn't you say one word about those who have been harmed or hurt? Or do you not believe anybody was abused by a priest? I was really upset.
Yeah.
And everybody just kind of, uh-oh, you know.
Again, we're not attacking faith.
No.
We're attacking the hierarchy.
Yes.
And until that hierarchy
ignorance.
actually makes substantial changes,
Right.
don't give your weekly tithing.
Right.
Like the priest says, what are you committed to the next year? But like nothing.
Right.
I'm going to be here every week, but I'm not giving you money, the church money.
You can put a note in the basket saying, until this gets fixed,
right?
Sorry, I can't support you financially. That,
and that's all they understand is the bottom line, and that's the only way to really get them to change.
Well, it gets attention. It certainly did up in Boston when cardinal law and all this revelation first came out of Boston. Parishioners stopped putting money in the basket. That's what got law moved from Boston. They still took care of him. He was moved to one of the most important palaces in the Catholic Church in Rome, St. Mary Major's. He was put in charge of this very important, or St. John Lateran, one or the other. He was put in charge of one of the most important basilicas in church's history.
Sinful.
Yeah. Yes. It's troubling. It's troubling. And we got to stop sending that message.
Right.
That by rewarding these men who have done so much harm. Sorry,
Any last word?
Well, I want to encourage anyone who's been harmed or abused in any way to know that healing is possible, to come forward. You may not want to share anything publicly. That's up to you. You have to be in that space. But don't be afraid. The majority of people will not blame you. And your healing cannot depend on what other people think. It cannot. You need to do what's good for you. Always, always. And I applaud those who have found the courage to come forward and heal. And I hope and pray you all do the same. Anybody who's been so hurt. And there are resources out there. SNAP has a website. Male Survivor, 1 in 6. There's a lot out there. There's many books on the subject. Just please take care of yourself. If you begin to find yourself spiraling or, because you're working on this healing and you're working on it, it can bring up very powerful emotions. Take care of yourself. Stop. Take breaks. Walk away from it for a while, If you miss your faith, fine. If that brings you peace, great. But if it's causing you turmoil or more stress, it's okay. Move on. Okay?
Right.
That's what I hope others will hear. And SNAP's got a conference coming up in Harrisburg in just a few weeks. You can go on the website, check it out. Come join us. Every year they run a conference in different parts of the country. Male Survivor runs retreats for men and women, but particularly male abuse victims in a large forum with many people. A lot of professional therapists attend and run these sessions. Very successful, really important. I know they're healing, very healing. So something worth looking into if you have the opportunity.
Right on. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Clark, for this opportunity. This work is so important. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. And there you have it, everybody. Someone very knowledgeable on the workings of the Catholic Church and the inner goings of laws. And I can't wait to see this Seton Hall report and the Attorney General report. It's going to be a bombshell for both of them. So I thank Mark for being here, and we'll see you next week. Peace.